They called me hysterical when my compass showed impossible readings. The lieutenant commander ripped my chart in half in front of everyone. 3 hours later, when the storm hit and radar finally caught up, I watched him realize I'd saved 47 lives he almost threw away because I was a woman. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or told you're overreacting, stay with me. This is the story of how I went from being the laughingstock of Naval Unit 6 to the navigator they still study in training programs. Hit that like button if you've ever had to prove yourself twice as hard, and subscribe because this gets wild. My name is Senna, and at 26 years old, I became the youngest navigation specialist aboard the USS Meridian. I also became the only woman on the bridge crew, which sounds like an achievement until you realize it meant I was walking into a room that had been exactly the same for decades. They didn't want me there. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't have to. It was in the way Lieutenant Commander Vaughn would talk over me during briefings, the way Holden would repeat my suggestions 5 minutes later and get credit for them, the way Sweetheart and Princess replaced my rank more often than I care to remember. But I didn't care about their comfort. I'd earned my position through perfect navigation scores, flawless simulation runs, and more hours studying maritime weather patterns than anyone else in my class. Respect, though? That was a different ocean entirely. My days started at 0500 hours with weather checks and course plotting. There's something meditative about navigation when you love it the way I do. The mathematics, the astronomy, the way old methods and new technology can work together if you let them. I wasn't one of those navigators who relied solely on GPS and radar. I kept my grandfather's brass compass on my station, this beautiful World War II relic he carried through the Pacific. People called it old-fashioned, a decoration, a good luck charm. But that compass had guided him through waters that would have swallowed lesser sailors, and I trusted it the way I trusted my own instincts. Call it belt and suspenders navigation, call it overly cautious. But when you're responsible for 47 lives, you don't take shortcuts. You use every tool available. The crew dynamics were exactly what you'd expect. Vaughn was a 15-year veteran who treated the bridge like his personal kingdom. He'd been passed over for captain twice, and I think that bitterness had calcified into this rigid need to prove he was always the smartest person in the room. Then there was Holden, my rival navigator, who'd expected my promotion and never forgave me for getting it instead. He had this way of undermining me that was subtle enough to seem like jokes, little comments about women's intuition, asking if I was feeling okay when I'd present data he didn't like. The rest of the crew just watched. Captain Rourke was fair but hands-off when it came to what he called crew dynamics, which is military speak for, "I'm not getting involved in your interpersonal drama." So I learned to keep my head down, do exceptional work, and wait for the moment when my competence would be undeniable. That moment came during what should have been the most routine patrol of the year. 3 days in the North Atlantic, clear weather forecast, calm seas predicted. It was supposed to be easy, but the morning we departed, something felt wrong. I can't explain it better than that. Something in my bones knew we were heading toward trouble. The air had this metallic taste, like licking a battery, and my grandfather's compass started acting strangely during pre-departure checks. The needle would swing, hesitate, swing again, like it was searching for something. I ran diagnostics on all my digital instruments. Everything came back normal. Satellite imagery showed nothing. Weather models predicted smooth sailing. But that compass kept moving and my gut kept twisting. And I'd learned a long time ago that when something feels wrong at sea, you pay attention. You always pay attention. It was 0600 hours during my morning watch when everything changed. I was alone on the bridge except for the helmsman, running standard checks, when I noticed my grandfather's compass doing something I'd never seen before. The needle wasn't just swinging, it was fluctuating wildly, spinning almost a full rotation before snapping back, then doing it again. My heart started pounding because compasses don't do that. They respond to magnetic fields, to interference, to disturbances in the Earth's natural patterns. I immediately cross-referenced with every digital instrument at my station. GPS coordinates, stable. Magnetic field readings, completely normal. Barometric pressure, steady. Weather radar, clear for 200 miles in every direction. but that brass needle kept spinning like it was screaming at me. I pulled up everything I could find about electromagnetic disturbances and severe weather patterns. I'd read accounts, historical ones, mostly from before modern radar, about sailors detecting massive storms through compass anomalies hours before they were visible. There was this documented case from 1987 where a fishing vessel's analog instruments went haywire 12 hours before a Category 4 hurricane that satellite imagery somehow missed until it was almost on top of them. The science is real. Massive storm systems generate electromagnetic fields that can interfere with navigation equipment, and sometimes the old instruments catch what the new ones filter out as noise. I spent 2 hours documenting everything, taking readings every 15 minutes, watching that needle dance. The metallic taste in my mouth was getting stronger. I knew something was coming. The morning briefing was my chance to report it. Lieutenant Commander Vaughn stood at the head of the table with his coffee, running through standard patrol protocols, weather updates showing clear skies, and I waited for my turn to speak. When I presented my findings, the compass readings, the historical precedents, the electromagnetic patterns, the room went silent. Then Vaughn laughed, not a chuckle, but this full, condescending laugh that made my face burn. "Are you seriously bringing a superstitious hunch to my briefing, navigator?" he said, and I watched every other officer look down at their tablets. That's when Holden jumped in with his contribution. "Maybe your woman's intuition is just PMS, Senna?" The room went dead quiet. Someone coughed. Nobody defended me. Nobody said a word. Vaughn just shook his head and told me to check my instruments, recalibrate everything, and stop wasting operational time with feelings. I went back to my station furious and terrified in equal measure. Furious because I'd presented legitimate data and been laughed out of the briefing. Terrified because that compass was still spinning and every instinct I had was screaming danger. I spent the next 2 hours checking everything twice. I recalibrated every digital system. I pulled satellite imagery from 3 different sources. I analyzed radar data going back 48 hours. Everything, and I mean everything, showed clear weather. No storms, no anomalies, nothing that would justify changing course or alerting command to potential danger. But my grandfather's compass kept swinging, and when I stepped outside for air, that metallic smell had intensified. It wasn't just in my mouth anymore, it was in the air itself. I plotted the historical data again, compared atmospheric pressure trends, looked for any pattern that would explain what I was seeing, and that's when I found it. The exact same compass behavior had been documented before that 1987 storm, the one that killed 12 people because no one believed the warnings until radar finally caught up. I knew with absolute certainty that we were sailing directly into something catastrophic, and I had no idea how to make anyone believe me. By 1400 hours, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. The compass readings had intensified, the needle practically vibrating now, and I'd noticed something else, subtle barometric pressure shifts that the automated systems were dismissing as negligible, but that fit the exact pattern of pre-storm conditions. I requested an emergency meeting with Vaughn and Captain Rourke. I walked into that ready room with my documentation printed out, my hands shaking but my voice steady, and I laid it all out. The compass data, the historical precedents, the pressure changes, my recommendation to alter course immediately and head toward safer waters. I watched Captain Rourke lean forward, actually interested, actually listening. And then I watched Vaughn's face turn red. "You're basing this on a 70-year-old compass and feelings?" His voice was loud enough that people outside the ready room could hear. Holden, who'd somehow inserted himself into this meeting, chimed in immediately. "Captain, she's putting emotions over data. This is exactly why—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew what he meant. Everyone knew what he was really saying. I tried to maintain composure, tried to keep my voice level, but my whole body was shaking now. Not from fear, from rage, from the weight of being right and being dismissed because of who I was instead of what I knew. That's when Vaughn grabbed my navigation chart off the table. This was the chart I'd spent hours perfecting, with course corrections plotted, alternative routes marked, every calculation triple-checked. I watched his knuckles go white around the edges. I watched the veins bulge in his neck, and then he ripped it in half, right down the middle. The sound of that paper tearing echoed in the small room like a gunshot. He held both pieces up and said, "This is what I think of your instincts, Navigator. We follow real data here, not women's intuition and antique trinkets." He threw the pieces at my feet. I should have stayed quiet. I should have accepted it. But I couldn't. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm requesting this goes on record. I am formally recommending course alteration based on observable data and historical weather pattern analysis." My voice cracked on the last word. Vaughn's hand slammed down on the table so hard I felt it in my chest. His face was inches from mine. "Stand down, Navigator. That's an order." Spittle hit my cheek. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them behind my back. But I held his gaze. "I want it noted in the official log that I recommended course alteration at 14:17 hours. The silence that followed was worse than the yelling. Then Vaughn smiled. Actually smiled. "You want it noted? Fine. Log that Navigator Senna wasted command time with emotional hysteria." That word. Hysterical. The word they always use. The word that erases competence and replaces it with weakness. He dismissed me from my station, sent me below deck to cool off like I was a child throwing a tantrum instead of a trained specialist trying to save lives. Walking through the ship afterward was like walking through a nightmare. Crew members whispered and looked away. Someone had already written "hysterical navigator" on my locker in permanent marker. I sat in my quarters alone, that compass still in my hand, watching the needle spin faster now. The metallic smell was so strong I could taste it in the back of my throat. I pulled up weather data on my personal tablet one more time, desperately hoping I was wrong. But the digital system still showed nothing, and I still knew with every fiber of my being that we were sailing into catastrophe. And no one would listen. 3 hours and 25 minutes after they dismissed me, I felt the ship's movement change. I was still in my quarters, still holding that compass, and the rolling motion shifted into something different, something deliberate and wrong. Then the intercom crackled to life. "All hands stand by for weather advisory." My heart stopped. I looked down at the compass in my hands, and the needle was spinning so fast it was nearly a blur. I didn't wait for permission. I ran to the bridge, and I didn't care what Vaughn would say. I didn't care about orders anymore. The scene I walked into was chaos. The radar screen that had been completely empty 3 hours ago was now lit up like a Christmas tree, red and orange cells covering half the display. A massive storm system appearing out of nowhere, and everyone was shouting at once. Captain Rourke's voice cut through. "Where the hell did this come from? How did we not see this?" The meteorology officer was stammering something about electromagnetic interference masking the system from instruments. And then I heard the numbers. 47 miles away and closing fast. I watched Vaughn's face drain of color as he looked at the radar timestamp. I watched the exact moment he did the math. He turned and saw me standing in the doorway. Our eyes met, and I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. He pulled up the ship's log, his hands actually trembling, and read my warning timestamp, 14:17 hours. The current time on the screen, 17:42 hours. 3 hours and 25 minutes. If he'd listened to me, if he'd changed course when I begged him to, we'd be safe right now. Instead, we were directly in the storm's path, and there was nowhere to run. Captain Rourke's voice snapped everyone back. "Navigator Senna, plot emergency course, now." I didn't hesitate. My hands were completely steady now, steadier than they'd been all day. I calculated the fastest route using both my compass readings and the radar data, finding a corridor between 2 storm cells that the instruments almost missed. Vaughn started to object, started to say something about following proven digital navigation, and the captain cut him off mid-sentence. "She's been right so far. Follow her heading." Those words were better than any apology. Then the storm hit us. 40-foot waves that made the Meridian feel like a toy boat. The ship tilted 35 degrees and I heard equipment crashing, heard someone screaming, heard the howl of wind that sounded like tearing metal. For 2 hours, I navigated us through hell. Every heading I called, Vaughn questioned. Every turn I recommended, he hesitated. And every single call I made was right. I watched Holden throw up into a bucket in the corner. I watched crew members who'd laughed at me that morning, now watching me like I was the only thing standing between them and the ocean floor. My grandfather's compass stayed steady in one hand while I worked the digital controls with the other, old wisdom and new technology finally working together the way they were always meant to. The storm that should have killed us became the storm we survived because I'd given them 3 hours of warning they ignored and 2 hours of navigation they had no choice but to follow. When we finally broke through to calm waters, the bridge was silent except for heavy breathing and the sound of rain still pelting the windows. Vaughn wouldn't look at me. He couldn't, because we both knew that every single person on this ship was alive because of the hysterical woman he'd humiliated, and that changes everything. The storm passed, and with it came the damage reports. Minor injuries, a broken arm, some cuts and bruises, 1 concussion. Equipment damage that would take weeks to repair. But 0 casualties. 47 people walked away from something that should have killed us all. Captain Rourke requested a full incident report from Naval headquarters, and I watched Vaughn's face go pale when he realized what that meant. Everything would be reviewed, every communication, every logged entry, every decision. Headquarters took 72 hours to analyze the data, and those were the longest 3 days of my life. The crew treated me differently now, respectful nods in the corridors, space made for me at meals, my rank actually used instead of those condescending nicknames. But I didn't know if it would last. I didn't know if the official report would vindicate me or find some way to make this my fault for not being more persuasive, for not following chain of command properly, for being too emotional in my delivery. I'd seen the military protect its own before, and I was still the outsider. Then the report came through. Naval headquarters confirmed everything. The electromagnetic anomaly had obscured the storm from modern instruments exactly the way I'd predicted. Traditional compass readings were more reliable in that specific scenario. My warning had been logged 3 hours and 25 minutes before radar detection, and then came the line that changed everything. Navigator Senna's early warning and subsequent navigation directly resulted in 0 casualties. Her actions are credited with saving 47 lives. A formal commendation was being added to my record. Captain Rourke called a senior staff meeting that afternoon. He played back the audio recordings from the ready room, my warnings, my data presentation, and then Vaughn's response. Hearing that word hysterical played back in Vaughn's own voice, with the whole command staff listening, knowing now that I'd been right about everything, I watched him shrink in his chair. He tried to justify it. We followed standard protocol. The digital systems showed clear weather. Any reasonable officer would have made the same call. Captain Rourke let him finish. Then he said, "Protocol almost killed my crew, Lieutenant Commander. She warned us. You didn't just dismiss her warnings. You humiliated her for giving them. That's in your permanent record now." The consequences came swift and official. Vaughn received a formal reprimand that would follow him for the rest of his career. He was removed as bridge crew supervisor effective immediately. Holden got written up for contributing to a hostile work environment, his own promotion prospects suddenly very dim. And me, I was promoted to lead navigator with full authority over all navigation operations. I got the watch schedule I'd wanted, the respect I'd earned, and the apology I'd never expected. The morning I walked onto the bridge as lead navigator, Vaughn was still there, demoted but not transferred yet. He had to salute me. I watched his jaw tighten, watched his hand tremble slightly as it came up, and I saluted back, crisp and professional. "Good morning, Lieutenant Commander." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. We both knew what had happened here. My grandfather's compass sat on my new station, polished and proud, still spinning slightly in its case. That old brass instrument had saved 47 lives and my career in one 3-hour window. And now, when I gave warnings, people listened. Not because I'd proven them wrong, because I'd proven myself right. So where are they now? Vaughn retired early, his reputation damaged beyond repair. Holden transferred to a desk job where he couldn't undermine anyone else's career. And the USS Meridian? We became known as having the sharpest navigation in the fleet. My grandfather's compass is displayed in my quarters. Still in use, still trusted. My story became a case study in naval training programs. They call it Navigator Senna's Storm, teaching the importance of respecting all data sources, old and new. 3 other women have joined our bridge crew since then. The culture is changing, slowly, but it's changing. Do I feel vindicated? Absolutely. Do I feel sorry for Vaughn? Sometimes. Ego can be fatal at sea, and his almost was. Would I do it again? Without hesitation. That metallic taste before a storm? I still get it. And now, people listen. Here's what I learned. Trust your instruments. All of them, including your training and your instincts. Stand firm when you know you're right, even when the entire room is against you. Documentation matters. That log entry saved lives in my career. And old wisdom combined with new technology? That's where real expertise lives. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been called hysterical for being right or emotional for being thorough, leave a comment. Tell me your story. And subscribe, because standing up for yourself, that's what this channel is about. You're not overreacting. You're not too sensitive. You're probably just right, and they're not ready to hear it. Until next time, trust your compass.